Welcome to the second episode of The Opinion Piece. Joining me again, Jack Rumbol, CEO and founder of Havio Health and Safety. And that's what we're talking about, health and safety. Last week, we did an introduction. This week, we want to try and explain a bit more the CDM Regs 2015 and all the different areas that you should be concentrating on and looking at health and safety. Jack, welcome back. We're going to try and cut this down into about 8 to 10 minutes. There's so many areas of health and safety. I went on their HSE website and it's just, look, I'm going to be honest, this is not something most trades are going to read.
No.
What are the main areas? We had a quick chat before we started recording. Asbestos is big in terms of what HSE are pushing at the moment, rightly so. Mental health we'll talk about next week. But silicosis is one which you feel is going to come an even bigger worry.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think ultimately there's many layers and there's many areas of health and safety that are important. The one, just to take it back one step, ultimately what governs construction health and safety is the CDM regulations 2015.
Yeah.
So construction design management regulations. And that basically puts duties on everyone who's a duty holder, from the clients, essentially the people with the money, the designers, the people designing the buildings, contractors, the main contractors, the people actually building it, and then the contractors, the people supporting the main contractors, and then workers. So they're the sort of the main duty holders under CDM, and they've all got different areas which we can't possibly go into in this area. So that's essentially the landscape from a construction perspective. Just to add one more area into it, we've had the biggest regulatory change probably since CDM, which is the Building Safety Act, 2022. Much needed in the industry. That this has essentially been kick-started from the tragic events which happened in 2017 in Grenfell, where there was kind of like a reset and saying, look, the industry's gone really far wrong here in terms of how it procures, everything in between. That the industry is still majorly trying to get to grips with even now, and that will continue for the next couple of years while it beds in. Definitely a good thing for the industry. Obviously more at the top end than it is down the bottom end in terms of domestic stuff. And then what you've got onto there is there's lots and lots of hazards within construction, all that are very important. You've got working at height, the biggest cause of workplace fatalities at this moment in time. We can talk about mental health and that one in a minute, but from a workplace fatality perspective, from what's recorded, working at height is still the number one. Then asbestos, still got huge issues with asbestos within the industry. But then you rightly said about silicosis. Now, there's a lot of people talking at the moment about silicosis and how it's going to be the next big thing. Now, it already is, but obviously they have latency periods of between 25 and 40 years, and that's what asbestos has. So it obviously becomes more of an issue as time goes on. Asbestos wasn't known as a big issue until I think it was 1980s, 1990s. So silica is definitely there.
Just explain anyone not quite sure what silicosis is and also how you get it, because
it's from natural stone, essentially. From stone, it's a very, very fine dust that's given off that when ingested and goes into and inhaled into the lungs, basically creates a little bit of, without getting too technical, sits into the lungs, creates scar tissue around it, and then silicosis is what happens.
There's all these different terms, but sorry to interrupt, but to me there's so much fine dust.
Yeah.
The finest dust that I've ever worked with is taking apart an old house. 100 years old.
Yeah.
That old brick dust or muck is so fine.
Yeah.
When you're knocking up finish,
Yeah.
you're in a bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, look, let's be fair. You've got the bag under one arm, the whisk in the other in a bucket.
Yeah.
As you tip it into the water, you get dust.
Yeah.
Is it all a similar kind of?
No, there's some dusts are more harmful than others. Some are pretty much there's no issues with them. You still don't want to really breathe it in, but there's from natural stone, from the silica dust, asbestos dust, obviously, wood dusts. There's some that are carcinogenic.
MDF.
So then it's just all about controlling it, and then basically you go through what's called the principles of prevention, which is, well, can it be eliminated? So at the design stage now, if you're working with architects, they'll be trying to work out, is there a way that we can take out this issue of dust generation on site and actually take it to a more controlled area, i.e. a factory? Can we create precast concrete slabs that are going to be brought to site that don't need to be cut? That's called design risk management. That's what a principal designer should be doing, which is the person in control of the pre-construction phase. They're trying to eliminate risks before they come to site. Another classic is, on construction sites, in terms of hot works on sites. So from a construction fire perspective, you now have push fit, rather than doing hot work and brazing on site. So there's all different ways that you can try and eliminate risk before it comes to site. Obviously, we're still in construction. You can't eliminate it completely, otherwise we won't build anything.
But it's interesting you say that, because in the decades I've been doing houses up, I've never ever seen on any set of drawings what you just mentioned.
Yeah, and this is the
and that's 98% of the industry.
This is the chasm. You've got your commercial construction, big construction, where they've got the whys and wherefores and the means to be able to do this stuff. And then, with the greatest of respect, you've got everything else, which don't sometimes have these people thinking in that way.
Have we not done this the wrong way around? If you're looking at 2% of the industry that, as you rightly say, have got everything in place, it's like Fort Knox trying to get onto some sites. But then the other side, us lot, the 98%, haven't got a clue about half this
And I
stuff.
think what they've tried to do with the 98% is try to deal with it in a more practical sense, which is, I don't think it's succeeded, but you need to put more power into the people doing the job to want to do it for themselves and keep them safe. It's not worked.
No,
it's not worked.
It's not worked.
It's not worked.
No.
But I'm an eternal optimist. I've still got great hope that it can work, but it's gonna require a little bit of a rebrand of health and safety, as we spoke about in episode 1. Getting people to do it because it's good for them, because they want to be able to go home to their families and they don't want their lives to be cut short at the age of 60. And they want to see their grandkids grow up and everything else. If you can get into the hearts of minds of people, and you can get past the macho culture that still exists within our industry, and human nature is it will never happen to me. And what I try to do as the CEO of a health and safety consultancy is not to sell on fear, because the easiest thing for me to do is to say to a business owner, okay, well, if you don't do this, you could end up in prison, you could end up with this fine. Whereas I'm like, okay, that should be part of my arsenal in terms of how I approach this. But really what I want to try and get that business owner to understand is that if you do this, and like I said in episode 1, if you do this, your staff are more happy, more productive, you'll earn more money. Talking pounds and pence with a person at the top of a company usually works more effectively than trying to strike the fear of God into it.
So you're selling it as a positive, whereas others are probably saying it's a negative.
I will never ever sell on fear. I've refused to do it. I'm a realist and I'll tell people how it is, but I won't sell on fear, which is one of the big differences between us and a lot of our competitors, which is their go-to is the easy one, which is, if you don't do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. And I just made a decision when I got into health and safety that I was going to try and change the image of the industry and try and challenge the negative perceptions that are there. Because I've come up through the industry. My dad worked in the construction and waste industry. My family are all in demolition. I understand how health and safety is perceived, which gives me a benefit. Whereas a lot of people now go into health and safety, it's actually now a vocation. It's a job to go into. And this isn't I'm not being disparaging here, but a lot of people are now lacking the experience when they go into health and safety because they haven't been on the tools. And I'm not saying that you have to have been on the tools to be a good health and safety practitioner. I'm just saying you need to have an appreciation of it.
It's another subject for another day, but my view is if you're on the tools, it sets you up to do a lot of project management is the key one for me.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you can run a project if you've not been on the trowel or, you're a carpenter or whatever. Anyway, another subject for another day. I said it in the last episode, I've got this wonderful printout here. As you say, it probably doesn't scratch the surface because this is all reported through Riddle.
Yeah.
So we're talking a few percent of the industry figures.
Yeah.
They're hugely high. They're getting worse. I mean, next week we'll talk about mental health, which is obviously the big killer.
Yeah.
The one horribly common thing, looking at all this, every year these figures are going up, fatalities and suicides. Without trying to put you on the spot, how on earth, as an industry, do we get these figures down? Because if we want to attract more youngsters, which we need urgently, record numbers leaving, youngsters coming in, when you got the Daily Mail saying, we've got another this, another that, we've got to get these numbers down.
We've got to get the numbers down.
Is it the 98%?
Is what the 98%?
That are responsible for a lot of the bad press, and because as you rightly say, your tier 1 and 2s have got everything in place, maybe too much so.
Yeah.
But there's a huge, most of the industry aren't doing the right things.
No, but the easy thing to do is to blame the industry and say, right, because they're not doing the right things. But I think there's an ignorance and there's a lack of knowledge, and it's down to us in the industry to try and look at things in a positive mindset, but also, try and get it across to people. Understand that everyone. This is where I'm a massive proponent of understanding human behaviour. people don't want to go to work to hurt themselves, right? But in human nature, people will go to work and they'll cut corners to earn more money. So, there's all of this.
Or they're forced on big sites to cut corners. That's the other thing.
Yeah, or can be forced to cut corners. But we need to get into people to make them do the right thing. To do the right thing, they need to be educated in what that is, right? So there's a massive educational piece here. And we're going to talk about it in probably episode 3 in terms of the mental health stuff. But I think where it's gone wrong is that essentially we're sometimes focusing too much at operative level and not enough at the leadership level. And ultimately the CDM regs, to be fair to them, and the Building Safety Act now is actually getting people to understand at the very top tier, i.e. the client, the one in charge of the purse strings, saying they've actually got the biggest responsibility for health and safety. Now that's fine on commercial. On domestic, Mr. and Mrs. Blogs who own a house don't understand CDM, and they don't need to, because the responsibilities go to the principal contractor and the principal designer. But it is, there's a lot to it in terms of what we can do about it and how we can drive it forward. I think it's getting to understand what drives people to do the things that they do, human behaviours, and hardly anyone in my industry is thinking enough about that at this moment in time. They think that if they create a rule, people will follow the rule and then they'll get the result that they want. So it's like, right, create a rule, people will follow it, people will they'll drive it down. That doesn't work. The human mind does not work like that. People are very strange, they do very weird things, sometimes totally irrational, and they're driven by things that they're not even conscious of, and the subconscious mind can drive them to do something that no one could predict. So understanding human behaviours is where it's all about.
Just before we finish this episode, one thing I want to touch upon is I've been up and down the country, seen a lot of people on sites over the years. As you rightly say, sometimes as an individual, you'll cut corners, get the job finished quicker, depends if you want a price day work, but to earn more money.
Yeah.
However, some big sites, you've also got project managers, senior directors going, look, we're running behind, get this done. But we can't do it that way, safely, efficiently, correctly. Don't care, do it, you're getting knocked, you're not getting, next week, don't come in. So also, that rule, that's got to be pushed to the press, because that happens alarmingly.
Yeah, I mean, look, you and I have been in the industry most of our lives. The construction industry, and this would be a huge other topic that we're probably not going to go into, but the construction industry needs a rebrand as well, because
that's what we're doing.
Exactly, because there are many working practices that you see out there, and there's the cultures on site. It never fails to amaze me. We look after 400 clients, and if I'm thinking about one client now, I won't say the name, but you've got one site that is an absolute abysmal in terms of how it runs, and you've got another site which is brilliant. And I'm thinking, same company, same management system, same leadership, but what is it? I'll tell you what it is. It's the project manager who's running it, right? In the construction industry, I don't think enough weight is put behind leadership, right? And leadership, you are a leader. If you're a project manager of a project, you are a leader. And the board of directors, I don't think always put the right people in charge of jobs. People tend to work their way up, not necessarily with due merit. There will be other things at play. And then you get different workplaces with the same company and different projects. And you're like, how can it be so different? But it's because they're not prioritizing leadership. Now, the big boys have cottoned onto it and have got now leadership programs and everything else. We're saying it time and time again. I don't think we need to worry too much about the tier 1s and the tier 2s. It's the tier 3s and below where the main issues lie. And if the HSE focus more of their attention, and to be fair, they are starting to, they don't really go on the tier 1, tier 2 sites now. They leave them alone because they know they've got all the management systems, they've got all the sort of self-regulatory. They'll go there essentially every now and again, but it's at that level where they are now starting to target. They just don't have enough people to target it.
As you rightly say, a topic we could talk about for hours, no doubt, which brings us nicely to the end of this episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about the biggest killer. A big part of the Build Network UK is increasing working conditions, make them a lot better, getting suicide numbers down, mental health, as we all know, is the biggest killer in construction. The fact that the figures have gone up for suicides year on year for the last 5-6 years. And rather sadly, ONS, the Office of National Statistics, haven't produced this year's suicide figures in construction. As we film this, we are in May. They were due out autumn last year. I think that only says one thing, which they're getting worse. So next week we're going to talk about mental health because it's a big part of what we're doing here at the Build Network.